Viva la resistance! The train. Oh, have you said? I don't know. I can't speak another
Viva
language.
la resistance! You know, you gotta do it with a French accent.
But no, saying it in an accent doesn't mean you speak a foreign language. You know that, right?
But I'm allowed to be stereotyping the French because I'm British.
Are you really?
Well, yeah.
Well, this has just been a really elaborate con that Nick's been putting on for the last 5 years.
Well, if you are French, little Nicky Poo, then you about as alien to me as some of the aliens in this game. How you like that segue right there, huh?
Ooh,
Hey,
spicy.
I'm good, goddammit. No,
Shove that segue.
right up your ass. Hey, you know what? I have not played any of the Resistance games because, well, first of all, when the first Resistance came out, that's about the time that Sony was charging $1 billion for a PlayStation 3, and I wasn't about to pay that much to play a goddamn game of any type.
You got to think about it from the other side's perspective, because I shelled out $700 or whatever bucks for my PlayStation 3, and Resistance was one of the only games that had come out that you could play that was
True. Yeah. I mean, a few years later, it says Resistance 3 Platinum Edition. This is only reserved for the best-selling PlayStation 3 games. But it was only best-selling because there were no other PlayStation 3 games to play at the time.
At the time when Resistance 1 came out, you were pretty much paying $700 for one game at the time. And
a Blu-ray player when there were no Blu-rays to play on it.
Yeah, there was one Blu-ray that was going to cost you $700, and there was one game that was going to cost you $700. That a total package of $1,400 for some cheap-ass entertainment. Now, granted, Resistance 1 was said to be a pretty decent game, but still not worth buying the PlayStation at the time for the price. But then they came out with Resistance 2 when that was back in 2008, I believe, and the PlayStation had come down in price, but the game was said to not be all that good. Now, what was wrong with it? I don't know. I never played it. Has anybody else?
Yes, I've played all of the Resistance games.
I'd say, Resistance 1 had this whole kind of World War II meets aliens. So instead of fighting Nazis, you're kind of fighting aliens.
What's the difference?
The mustache?
Aliens are worse.
No, it's okay. Truth be told, it's an alternative timeline where these aliens arrived in Russia during 1908, and they just kind of spread across Europe. Resistance 1 took place in Britain, where the British and the Americans were trying to make a stand there, and then Resistance 2 is when the aliens finally invade the United States. And Resistance 3 picks off where 90% of the world's population have either died or been converted to the Chimera, which is the alien species.
And you know what? I hate the Chimera because there's no good explanation for them. It's are they aliens? But then they suggest in Resistance 2 that they're excavating these giant machines out of the ground, they've been on the Earth the entire time. And then in 3, there's a question here about have they been here forever? Who are these assholes? I don't know.
I guess the makers of the game just watched War of the Worlds or something at that time, so they thought it would be a good idea to use that. But
apparently I don't need to play Resistance 1 or 2 because it sounds like nobody knows what the fuck is going on with this story.
Yeah, simply you're trying to put too much thought into it. It's just alien invasion. But what I like about the series is that it starts from the beginning where humanity has a chance to fight back, and we're just getting our asses kicked all the way down until it's just a group of survivors. There is no more army, American army, British army anymore. It's just survivors.
But see, you know what? That's what really pisses me off about the Resistance series is that I've never had real much of a problem with the gameplay, but the story is just, Resistance 1, you play through, you're in Europe, you finish it up by destroying these towers, and the Chimera have been defeated. Okay.
In Britain, the only place that's safe, which is awesome. So.
Right. And then Resistance 2, you basically do the whole thing all over again. The Chimera invading America, America's getting its ass kicked. You're part of this little special ops squad. You roll around, you do stuff, you take down this big mothership, blah, 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 blah. Hooray! And then Resistance 3 starts up, and it's well, wait a minute. Didn't I beat Resistance 2? Didn't I win the fight? I seem to remember getting to the end of that, and everything blew up in a gigantic explosion. Then you start Resistance 3, and it's everybody's dead except for these fucking farmers in the middle of nowhere.
Well, Jeff, Mr. Professor Jeff, sir, obviously you fucked up and didn't do anything because by the time we get to Resistance 3, whatever kind of war we had going on, humanity has lost. And this is what I like about what they've done here. Now, I have no clue what has really gone on with this story. Apparently, when I start up with this game, I'm supposed to know not only the story, but I'm supposed to know the history of certain characters and all that kind of stuff, which I'll get into in a little bit. But what I do like about Resistance 3 is that things are kind of lost. I mean, where before it was sort of, like you said, hey, everybody put up the good fight and defend Earth and everything is hopeful. Now people just look like bums. It's a post-apocalyptic scenario. People are sitting around trash cans with fire with fingerless gloves, and it's I like that.
The first thing the Chimera did was destroy all clothing stores.
Yeah, just turn everybody into homeless people, and I like that they've kind of taken that turn with the story. Now, one of the things that I do get from this, at least from having to know what the characters are about, another thing that I like. They've taken what I guess is the hero, Nathan Hale. Now, that was your protagonist in Resistance 1 and Resistance 2. And by the time they got to Resistance 2, they were like, we're starting over kind of with a new scenario on this game. Let's just kill this son of a bitch. And that's what happens. You get killed by your friend, Joe Capelli, and the story picks up with you taking the role of Joe. And
he's who is the most white bread character. I've played so many games recently with just a white dude with brown hair and stubble saving the world, and this is just one more hash mark on that list. Nathan Hale was, he was infected with the Chimera virus. Like, there was he's a genetic experiment, blah 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 blah. There was all this crazy backstory to him. Joe Capelli is just like, I gotta save the farm. I gotta go to New York and save the farm from aliens.
He is that kind of guy. He's that kind of character who, wow, Jeff, I'm glad you said it and I didn't, because everybody would just say, why you always picking on white people? But he is probably like the most bland white guy out there. Kind of the tough, hard-hitting, I've been through a lot of shit type white guy, because, hey, his hair is all kind of all over his face, and he's got the beard that's half shaved, but he can't shave it all the way down. It's like a permanent 5 o'clock shadow. And of course, because he's been through so much, he has to talk like this. And I have to protect my family. I have a little boy and a wife, and I must do the right thing.
True, but he has a little bit more in him than in Nathan Hale. I thought Nathan Hale wasn't really of an exciting character. I wasn't that really fussed about whether he lived or died. I know it's cliched, but he has a little bit more backstory than Nathan Hale did.
It's all ginned up in the first 5 minutes of Resistance 3. The first 5 minutes of Resistance 3 is basically this crash course. Like, Resistance 2 ended on this note where Joe Capelli shoots Nathan Hale in the face, and he's standing out there, and in the sky are all these planets that have never been there before. Nathan Hale says it's only just beginning, and then Joe shoots him in the face, and then suddenly you start up Resistance 3, and it's just like, no, now you've got to save the world from this whole other thing that nobody ever talked about. And there was one thing about this game that pisses me off. It's the fact that the end of Resistance 2 is interesting, and the beginning of Resistance 3 kind of took all that interest and just threw it away to build this other story about got to save my wife and kid from the mean old aliens.
Yeah, that's one of the things that, it's not a hard criticism, but it is a criticism of this game, is a story, which is pretty simple in that where you pick up here is that Joe, as we said, he's got a family, he's got a kid, he's been eating sand all day and talks like this. And,
he's a heavy smoker.
Yeah. He's been with these resistance fighters, and they're in Oklahoma. I forgot, New Haven or some city like that. And what happens is that he's fighting a good fight with everybody. He's trying to defend his family. They're not living great, but at least they're surviving somehow with an occasional fight here and there in this Oklahoma town. And then when they discover that there's a portal being built nearby that's terraforming the land and also bringing down other chimera and aliens from wherever they come from, they realize that the planet is lost unless they can find a way to shut this portal down. And that's where the real plot of the story comes in. So it does turn into a road trip movie. They have to take pretty much every form of transportation. They take a boat, They take a plane, they take some other futuristic spacecraft, even though this is the 50s. I think they're on rollerblades and a skateboard at one time. And they have to make their way to New York to find a way to stop the Chimera from invading the planet and keep the planet from terraforming and freezing over, which is the environmental conditions that the Chimera live in. Now, the problem with the story here is that there's no real emotional resonance on my part for these characters. At the beginning, it seems to set the story up okay. The voice acting is good. It's basic, but at least I feel like, okay, these guys, they have something to protect. And once you start playing the game, it doesn't seem to really matter anymore. And a lot of people looking at us and they're like, well, yeah, you son of a bitch, who cares? We want to play the game. I just want to shoot some stuff. And, well, if you want to go into gameplay.
Wait, before we go into gameplay, I just want to say that if one more game, movie, or TV show ends with "It's only the beginning," and then the next episode, game, or movie is the end, that's some bullshit right there. If you're going to set up some kind of epic thing like that, at least make 2 games. Make the end of the story Resistance 4, for fuck's sake. Like, don't just cut me off at the knees at the end of Resistance 3. I just had to get that off my chest. That's bugging me for a long time.
Just quickly on the story, one of the great things about this game is the world that you're immersed in, because since you are on a road trip, you start off like in the Mississippi River all the way through like to Pennsylvania to New York. You see how America's changed from the environment that we're used to into this hostile alien world. You'll see like these herds of gigantic insects crawling across the landscape and carcasses of these great sea serpents like in the Mississippi River. I thought that was fantastic.
I thought it was interesting, and I thought it actually looked cool. I've seen it done better in some games. I've seen it done better in something like Gears of War. Gears of War is granted on another planet, but it resembles Earth very much. And all of these little alien touches to a familiar environment, I've seen done better. But no, I'm always fascinated by post-apocalyptic dystopian futures and societies and the crumbling of humanity, especially when it's taken over by something alien. And it does hold your interest. Is it the best-looking representation of that? I don't think so. But it's still cool. As far as the gameplay goes, now, I don't know what Insomniac, who are the developers here, what they did.
Ratchet and Clank.
Ratchet and Clank. I'm talking about, I don't know what they did as far as the previous games to improve on this game. But it doesn't really do anything different from a lot of the shooters that we see out there. It doesn't do a whole lot of things different that we see from survival horror or any kind of action game where most of your story is told through things that look, I finally found one of my big pet peeves in games.
Yay!
We talked about this. It is
preach it, Korey. Preach it.
It is always finding diaries and recordings everywhere to tell the story instead of telling the story. It's like these people getting shot, chased, starving to death. Fucking having babies and them eating them. I don't know what they're doing, but somehow they find the time. Every fucking body writes a journal. If you wrote a journal, your teacher probably asked you to write a journal in high school, and did you like it? No, you hated it. You're not going to do it if you're out there fucking starving to death or if you're out there trying to fight for your life. But people find the time here to record that shit on something or to write something everywhere. And then what really irks me is that when they write all this personal stuff, they just throw it on the ground for somebody else to find it. So
it's true, but it's not like in Dead Space where they would write in their own blood, "I am dying" or something on the wall.
They had it. Yeah.
This.
Yeah, you're right. I mean, yeah, I didn't like it in Dead Space either, but Dead Space, the gameplay was good enough for me to ignore that. But they tell the story through a lot of things like that. So, there's a lot of familiar stuff that they do here that's not different from as far as telling the story from a lot of survival horror action games that we see, or as far as gameplay goes. It's not that different from like a lot of shooters. You still have your standard weapons. You got a shotgun. You got a sniper gun. You have an assortment of grenades. Now, Jeff, I know you want to say something, but before we start, I will also say that while it is sort of an average shooter, they do some things different here that I don't think that they do enough in a lot of shooters that we see for me to like what they did. One of the things that they did with the weapons is that you get about a dozen weapons here. And I like that even though some of these weapons are familiar, a lot of them are altered by alien technology. So, yeah, you get a shotgun, you get a sniper gun, but you get all these other cool weapons like the atomizer, which blows your enemies up into electric bits of molecules. And then you have the mutator, which makes your enemies get bloated and vomit up bile before they die. And you got some weapon that freezes them. It's fun to use these weapons, and it's fun to try to figure out at certain points when to use those weapons. So there's just an element of sort of puzzle play there when you're in certain environments where you have to like say, hey, I got to use this weapon instead of the weapon I used last time.
I think that it speaks a lot to the fact that Insomniac made Ratchet and Clank, because they know how to make a game where they give you a lot of different weapons and they give you a lot of different choices about how you want to go about attacking your